So it's pretty easy to tell when someone's good at their champion. For example, good Thresh players miss their hooks and bad Thresh players hit their hooks, right? Wait, I mean, it's not strictly false. Let me tell you why, and how you can change that. Though I do want to give you as many tips as possible to help you hit your hooks, be it predicting flashes, dashes, countering jukes, and even just basic aiming, the first thing I want to address is that hooks kinda do miss. You can't hit them all, you just can't. But I don't want this to be a demotivating thing either. Let's frame it differently. You can definitely raise your hook accuracy and not miss as often, but this isn't a single player game. The opponent can also dodge. Crazy, I know. So don't sweat missing your hooks, and especially don't worry much about your opponent dodging your hook. Just as you can make sure your Thresh hook has a high chance of hitting, all opponents have ways of making sure it doesn't hit, especially when everyone has flash. Now I know the title does say how to hit 100% of your Thresh hooks, and that's a question I still promise to answer for you a bit later in the video. I would just like to entice you with some more reasonable advice first. Thresh's hook is a skill shot with a 0.5 second cast time and a fair amount of travel time on top of that. The reward is a very strong CC ability with 1.5 seconds of stun and up to 2 pulls. This can lead to your team slaying that pick in that time, or even just you demolishing that target with a combo. All the tips I'll be sharing will be applicable to other champions, but everything is done from the perspective of a Thresh hook and its own characteristics. Though I know you want to outsmart your opposition by predicting their backwards double juke flashy dash, let's start with the most basic of basics, and learn to hit your hook exactly where you want to click. Please don't click off, it gets better. It sounds like an easy task for sure, and practice players will have no problem doing it. But if clicking exactly where you wanted to click was that effortless, we'd all be headshot machines in first-person shooter games, right? If you aim Q at your target, how often and how quickly can you hit it? At your own pace? Probably 100% of the time. But what if you're trying to hit it as quickly as possible while walking around the target, shifting cameras, or even using something like flash? As a practical example of where simply aiming at your intended target might need some more practice, a common enough Thresh play would be to cast your lantern backwards to an ally, then flash forwards, then either flay backwards or cast your Q forwards, and then finish with the other. That's a lot of back and forth mouse movement done very rapidly. And it can be understandable for a less experienced player to misclick at least one of these, and most likely and most grievously, the Thresh hook will be the one that fails. Like anything dexterous, muscle memory will be a big part in learning to send your hook where you want it to go and to do it quickly. Just like FPS players who practice clicking on heads, you can practice hooking a stationary champion. So load up the practice tool, throw a target dummy wherever, and just attempt to hit your Q with gradually increasing numbers of actions to help you warm up to this. Start with just your Q, then walking and queuing, then flashing and queuing, then throwing your lantern backwards and queuing, and so on and so forth. Now, we can begin to be a bit more interesting. Now you know how to practice hitting the exact target you want to hit. This was important because now that target area might not be exactly where the target is, but rather where they will be. Unfortunately, we can't make target dummies move, and bots move irregularly or don't leave tower without minion waves, but we do have some harmless targets to practice basic aiming. In Practice Tool, you can position yourself out of sight from the enemy minion wave or in the river against Scuttle Crab to try hitting the moving target. They're predictable, fairly slow, and if predicting linearly like this is a struggle, it can be worth practicing. But things do get more difficult in the real game. There's a big difference between Master Yi walking and Master Yi ulting. As you know, pro players are able to analyze the target champion, calculating their exact movement speed in relation to the cast and travel time of their hook to work out the perfect spot to No one does this. No one does it in shooters, no one has time. This is intuition. This is part of why training against a minion wave or crab is important. It's not because you're awful at calculating the speeds of these slow units, but as a starting point in training this intuition. Most of this intuition training is going to be in-game against real opponents, unless you have a very enthusiastic practice partner in custom games. Even if this doesn't directly help you hit enemies with increasing move speed like Master Yi, use this practice as a starting point, and when you come across champions that can gain move speed, try and use that intuition to aim ahead and hopefully hit that target. Luckily, as a Thresh player, you'll often see people moving in straight lines, typically towards your AD carry. The only way to improve this is to actually try. so don't shy too much on holding your hooks during your games. Every time you miss, you learn, and every time you hit, you learn. Over time, your hooks will get better. But if you do want to try practicing without other players, then just, again, the minions and Scuttle Crab can be a great way to do it. Both you and I know real players don't spend the majority of the game just walking. The vast majority of players have Flash as a summoner spell, which should be on D, but some people are weird. It's an instant blink dash ability that technically can perfectly counter any skill shot, including the Thresh Hook. They can use it in any direction, and forcing a flash with your hook should be seen as a win. But most of us don't want to stop there. We want to outsmart the enemy and end them. This will be the first lesson on predicting the enemy's movement and reading their mind. But just remember, this isn't a single player game. Just as you might outsmart the enemy, they might outsmart you. With that out of the way, what is Flash anyway? Try going into Practice Tool, turning on refreshing cooldowns, and just use Flash. Since most players that want to use Flash will be using it at its maximum range for maximum distance, that's what you're going to want to do, and familiarize yourself with that flash distance. With that in mind, you can hopefully start mapping out where your opponent will be when they flash. If they walk in a straight line and think flashing in a straight line will be enough, then you can probably hit them so long as you have that flash distance decently memorized. And of course, just because we're talking about flash, a lot of this will apply to most dashes, with some variance in distance. But there's a lot of questions that this raises. To start with, when will they use flash? Most players don't burn flash right away and try to hold it until it is absolutely necessary to use. Some players don't even use it at all, instead panicking once they're hit and flashing afterwards. This all has to do with reaction time. If someone knows you're going to hook, say they see you walking up, then one action they might try is flashing when they know they need to, as this allows them to get a slightly better idea of where your hook is going. In this case, you can try to anticipate that they will flash when your hook launches, and use that to time when to aim your hook. Now that's answering when, but now we move on to the all-important question of where. Stepping away from flash, consider the aforementioned walking in a straight line example. If you aim ahead, you'll hit your target. But what if they know you're going to do that? Well, they'll probably walk in the opposite direction in reaction to your hook. This is called a juke. So therefore, if you aim where they are now, or even a little behind them depending on their move speed and distance, you would be able to hit them if they juked in that way. However, if they didn't juke, your hook wouldn't hit them, and you'd look like you can't hit someone moving in a straight line. At this point, it's worth mentioning that if you put thought into that hook, you should probably be the only person you listen to. No one else knows the thought you put in. We've briefly touched on how to aim if you're predicting a juke, but again, how do you know they're going to juke? Just for clarity, at risk of sounding like a broken record, you cannot guarantee what they'll choose to do, but you can at least make a good guess. To me, the more time someone has to react to you, the more time they have to think of a plan to dodge what you're going to do. If you're camping in an unwarded bush, they probably aren't thinking of juking. However, if you've been closing in on them for a few seconds, like in a gank or a chase, that's usually enough time for them to think, "Ah, he's gonna hook! I better dodge this!" And most players will do the classic 180 turn when you cast hook in order to juke. For example, this Kiana has been laning against me as Thresh mid, yes you heard that right, for a while, and knows I'm trying to land a hook to kill her. You can see here that she knows I'm walking up all the way to the tower, and it's not a hard guess I want to throw a hook as close as I can. I know that she's going to try to juke, so I predict ahead, aiming where she is rather than the direction she's walking, and damn! She changed her mind right as my hook started flying. Likely they thought one step ahead and had the realization just as the hook started, predicting that I would predict. But on another game, I'm ganking the bot lane. Ignoring this Pyke right here who's too mobile for me to care about, I go for the hook on this Kai'Sa, who has had more than enough time to figure out what's going on. As you can see, with the distance between us, I aim a little behind her and BAM! She had thought up a counter plan, and it played right into my prediction, making an easy kill for the glory of AP Thresh. The whole reading their mind thing becomes intuition as well, just like aiming ahead. Even if it will never be 100% right 100% of the time, I can get a pretty good idea during a gank on whether or not I need to predict their juke, or if I'm good to aim in a straight line. Now, just as you can predict they'll juke, they can also predict that you're predicting they'll juke, and can react by just walking in a straight line. So I recommend against any kind of, damn, I can't predict noob, I can't believe they didn't even try to juke me mindset. You might just be being outplayed without realizing it. And once again, some players will be able to flash in time if they see you've predicted correctly, which I once again recommend seeing as a win. There are more ways than just the old 180 turn to juke projectiles though. Most champions with readily available dashes will use them if they think they need to. It helps to know what you would do in the situation they're in. A good way to learn that is to play the champion for an amount of time. I happened to be a big fan of playing LeBlanc and Shaco with the specific goal of messing with and juking people back in the glory days of Civ HD, so I have a bit of a mind for that. As a great example, here's a Shaco right here. He's currently being ganked and it's not going well for him and his carry. So as he runs into alcove, his goal is probably fairly obvious if you take a moment to think about where he most likely wants to run right now. The tower. The safest path for that would probably run along the bushes and straight towards the tower to get there the fastest way he can. And while seeing him prepare to jump from behind alcove, we throw a hook through that bush, trying to line it up with his likely path. In fact, straight lines happen more often than you think. To get away from a threat, a straight line is the fastest way to get away by just walking. And a lot of players in the heat of the moment will do just that. Take this Kiana who knows we're in the bush. And probably, in order to get out of the flay range as quickly as possible, she runs in a straight line, making this hook very easy to land. And you can see they tried to fix this by dashing in a right angle, but it was just about too late. There is the opposite to this as well, with players going directly towards you. Here's this same Kiana who juked me earlier. Here, after I read on Kiana's moves based on how she's acted before and the amount of time she's had to think of a juke, I catch her with the hook, but realise I can't finish the job without dashing in and auto-attacking, taking some turret damage on the way. This gives Shaco enough of an edge to try and take revenge for her as he goes in with clones. Unfortunately, as I'm playing AP Thresh, the Flay takes out his AP clone, fearing me and causing damage to bring me incredibly low. It's at this point that the Shaco chooses to use his Q stealth, and I don't know about you, but if I was a stealth assassin character and there's a champion surviving on a sliver of health, I'd probably be trying to get the last hit on them, which is exactly what allows me to confidently hook the invisible man and take the double kill. Going straight to an objective or other significant location can happen too. This Veigar here just wants to get down toward Dragon from the safety of this bush, but I'm kind of already there, and that leads to an easy pick on him. Oh, here he is again, this time going straight away from danger and lining up for an easy combo again, even in the middle of this team fight. Generally, the rule of fastest works a lot of the time, unless the enemy is thinking hard enough to subvert that. One of the easiest examples that is so frequent it's almost ridiculous is going around corners. In general, you'll round the corner faster if you hug the corner as you walk. Simple enough. That's why people do it. But not only that, going around the corner can cut vision off from you. Another reason they'd want to round that corner as quickly as possible. Of course, if you have that trained intuition and can predict where they've walked, it actually becomes even easier for you to land a hook on these kinds of players. It's almost magical how often this occurs. I mean, look at this! Here, from my point of view, Yasuo leaves my vision walking in a straight line like he knows I'm going to have an easier time hooking him around the corner, since he'd be closer. But if we flip to his vision, like by the effects of some curse, he immediately takes a 90-degree turn back to the wall, just to find my hook. Need more? Here in Arena, this Ari is trying to escape vision and rotate around to the arena plants for healing to make a comeback, and BAM! There she is, right next to the wall. Now it's not always strictly wall hugging. Here we see Kane's exited from his ult right up onto this ledge by bot tower. For this old version of Summoner's Rift, he'd want to take this straight line path to get around the tribush by his tower the fastest, since going directly north would likely meet him up with Rumble again. So knowing that, I can make a prediction with my hook, and catch him, dash to him, and prevent his escape. Then you can take all of this intuition and predicting and start re-adding dashes to the mix. Got him. Being able to accurately guess where someone might dash after you throw your hook is largely the same as predicting if someone is going to juke or not. I would say most players use their flash as soon as your hook launches to make sure you waste a cooldown, and so if you can guess the direction, it's not all that hard. It's just combining the previous two lessons together. In this clip, I chase down the Shaco with a lantern to my allies. Now, given his base is in my direction, and I know this guy knows I try to predict ahead, what he may think is the safest way out is to dash directly away from us and downwards, putting more distance from the hook, allowing him to maybe dodge it, or even juking into the bush. By this time, I already think I know what he's going to do, it's just a case of when. As we see, he tries to dash through me, and I catch him with the flay, slowing him to land the hook follow-up, and that one does a bit more than just stun him. You may also have noticed he walked up before queuing, which might seem like a dead giveaway that he's going to try and dash through me, but I have to admit my reaction times aren't that good, and I usually do rely more on anticipation than quick reactions. Also, remember that just because he looked in that direction doesn't mean he has to dash in that direction, so pretending to do that and then actually dashing another way is a powerful way to juke. Though, even if you have the dash distance roughly memorized or chalked up to intuition, they're not always going to go exactly one of two ways. Here, Shaco wants to run away from us, and he sees me coming from the side. Knowing he's going to try to dash away, I hook the wall to allow better reach with my hook to where I think he'll dash to. And I hook ahead to roughly his dash range, should he go directly to retreat into the brush, and miss. Close as it was, as they too admitted, we can see in the replay that Shaco angled his dash up a bit, while still at max dash distance, so it wasn't quite where I thought he would go. Just remember, I hit where I wanted to hit, but in this case, Shaco dodged my prediction. This is a multiplayer game. A lot of it is going to now come down to where you think they'll go, be it walking or dashing or juking. Experience on champions will help a lot, but I don't exactly fancy myself a Shaco or Yasuo main, but can still roughly predict their dash ranges and directions. If you really don't have much experience, I recommend playing some kind of dash champion, ideally one with a low cooldown that's similar to Flash. Shaco, Ahri, Gwen, Kassadin, Fiora, and many others could be great practice champions if you need to get to grips with dashing and juking better. Speaking of which, when you do play them, actively try to juke and dodge skill shots and see what works for you in terms of dodging, but also what ends up working for your opponents when they do hit you. Now, I mentioned guaranteeing hooks for that sweet 100% accuracy, but I just want to bring some more things to your attention first while we're still on about landing these non-guaranteed hooks. That's right, it's time for tips and trick shots. The generic advice against linear skill shots that stop at the first target like Blitzcrank hooks and Thresh hooks is to stay behind minions, since they'll block the projectiles for you. As a result, players behind the minion wave can feel a little too safe sometimes. By actively standing in front of enemy minions and acing the timing so the hook goes through the minion right after it dies, a hard to react and difficult to predict hook may just find its target. Here, Qiyana was hanging out a bit close to get her Q-pokes out, and after all, she's safe behind the minions. But as I allow the minions and tower to take this caster minion, I line up a hook from behind it, and even without great timing, Qiyana does not see it coming. And a fun trick was to wipe out a minion yourself with Minion Dematerializer, suddenly removing the hook barrier, and I used this here to catch this Ahri off guard. I had a lot of fun using this, but the inclusion of Dematerializer is showing how old this script is and how long it's taken for me to get around to finishing the guide. Hi, I'm rewriting and voicing this in May 2024, like 6 months after starting this video. So while you can't use Dematerializer to suddenly clear a minion, you can auto-attack them. It's a little more telegraphed, but I'm able to get this same Nasus twice with this trick. It's unorthodox and might seem like dumb luck sometimes, but it's a very quick and often unexpected mind game that you might as well take advantage of. And who says it has to be a basic attack? This overactive Yasuo who's been dashing and dodging so often gets too close and I flay him and his low health barrier minion both, making for a slowed Yasuo and an easy hook target to feed my tower. Right, so dematerializing a minion just for a jump scare might be a little bit unorthodox, but if we dial it back a bit, we can see something a little more normal for all Thresh roles. This advice is as old as time, being passed down for generations of Thresh mains, and that is to not hook at all. By simply walking up, you're giving the opponents the idea that you could hook them. If they don't respect it and think of ways to dodge, they're going to get hit, and it could be fatal. This can lead to players giving up CS with you doing next to nothing, or even weirdly zigzagging, effectively slowing themselves down, which helps you catch up and possibly hitting them with that guaranteed flay cast instead. In support, you can get away with this a lot by just walking ahead of the wave through the bush. Of course, it's better if you're ahead or you and your lane partner can beat the enemy duo in a fight, because if you can't... And as powerful as holding the hook and allowing the very idea of a hook to manifest and corrupt your opponent's mind is, if you can't back it up with a good hook when it's needed, it might severely drop off in effectiveness. Being able to influence your opponent's movements can certainly help you land a hook, and we've already talked about how holding your hook can cause your opponent to attempt a bit too hard to juke, and also how they might want to dive towards your carry, or you. But what if we could incentivize them to go exactly where we want them to go? Well, choose your favourite fishing hotspot bush, grab some control wards or farsight wards, and cast out your line cause we're going fishing. Long fans of the channel have likely seen this happen frequently enough that we know it can work. Players just can't resist that 10G from slapping a ward, and so throwing them down randomly as bait can really help line up a hook. Now, as a support, this can only work with great coordination from your team to not ruin the trap, but as a full AP Thresh, this can likely turn into a full-on kill combo. Obviously it costs 75 gold per ward, might not even work or attract any fish, so this is a meme strat more than anything. But every now and then I see an AD carry on their way to farm a lane, and I just can't resist. Another approach to a similar method is instead of using a ward as bait, why don't you just be the bait? Players love interrupting recalls, and perhaps more than that, they love beating AFK players senseless for free gold and a +1 to their KDA. While it's a little harder to convince someone you've disconnected, a quicker play is to recall somewhere close enough to incentivize them to hit you, but far enough that you can convince them that you think you can get away with this recall. Here I come for a gank as Jungle Thresh, don't question it, and seemingly can't do anything, so I just hit recall. And of course, Quinn can't help herself. This lines up the easiest hook of my entire life, and Quinn and Valor are both going into the lantern. If you go a bit further, you can choose to suddenly stop moving, and even tank a hit or two without moving, to convince some players that you've disconnected. If they see someone AFK for but a heartbeat, they will dash to devour them with unrivaled gluttony. This one isn't a fresh clip, but please enjoy this bit from my Skarner meme video from the past, especially since this Skarner looks and plays very differently now.
Shutting down.
Huh?
Good times. It's a really funny trick when it works, but don't expect it to work twice on most players, and the best players won't fall for it even once. Now we have to mention just one more type of hook, which is probably the most misunderstood, or so we cope. Though I joke often that a missed hook was just a zoning hook, sometimes it really is a zoning hook, and I've cried wolf way too many times at this point to be believed. The idea of a zoning hook is that its primary function is to prevent an enemy from going that way, like saying, if you go towards my carry, I will hook you, and I will kill you. And if they know that, they may back off, effectively juking your hook. So why not predict that juke? You could, but if you're wrong, they will move forward, unperturbed, and likely kill your carry in the time it takes your hook to miss. Yeah, you'd look cooler hitting the hook on the predicted juke, but it is far more important to get them off the carry no matter their choice than to actually hit the hook. That is the goal of the zoning hook, to zone. Enemies with dashes that can go towards your carry or their own target location can counter a perpendicular zoning hook if they know what you're going for, but the vast majority of opponents do tend to use dashes in and of themselves to counter hooks, not taking your predictions into account. For such a situation, I'd recommend just predicting the dashes towards your carry rather than a normal zoning hook. Aiming ahead with a zoning hook on an escaping enemy can work too. If they have to juke backwards into your chasing teammates to dodge your hook, that's likely an absolute win, even if you don't get any kill credit. Now, here's a few that may come up less frequently and of varying viability, but are good to have around. Some for effectiveness, and some for the funny. Due to their rarity, I might not have clips for everything, and some clips I know will be from older videos and meme videos with edits I can't undo, so bear that in mind. A pretty funny trick is to fake hook, walking up to someone, pressing the stop command to stand still for 1.5 seconds, then throwing out a lantern instead of a hook. Likely this is a prank to stop someone's recall or otherwise scare them for no reason at all. Significantly more viable is what I call a stacked hook. In simple terms, you throw a hook with multiple enemies lined up. The first might dodge, but if they do, you'll likely hit the second target who feels safe and might not dodge, allowing you to still get a hook, and more often, a dash. Stacking a hook with a minion behind your opponent allows an alternative approach within the same Q cast, like, sure you might dodge this, but I'm still approaching to beat your ass. This is definitely the kind of thing where you have to see an opportunity and take it, rather than something you can will into existence, so keep that in mind. Another concept is something I call in my head a masked hook. No, not a hook with Leandries on it, but instead acting like you're really focusing on one opponent, then throwing your Q towards your true hook target, masking your intent. Like the previous, you have to spot the opportunity where it arises, and very good players will constantly be ready to dodge hooks, but in real-time strategy games, catching players off guard is very much part of strategy and not exclusively something to use on bad players. The harder you commit to masking your hook, like committing auto attacks, flays, and even ults, the thicker the mask on your hook intentions will be. Just make sure you're good at all the previous stuff about actually landing hooks in the first place. Okay, one final word before we talk about guaranteed hooks. Missing is okay. I've made it a point to repeat this as often as I can in this guide about hitting hooks, but yeah, missing is completely okay. For one, no one really good at anything became that way without some kind of practice and a lot of mistakes. On your journey of improvement and learning, you will miss, and you will make incorrect predictions, estimates, and even just simply misclick while trying to land hooks, no matter how game-changing they could have been. That's alright. Outside of those individual matches, you are improving, and with any kind of skill, that's what matters. And in some ways, as we've said, hitting the hook is less important than the primary goal, like with those zoning hooks. Other people flaming you or pinging your hooks that you missed don't matter here. You're the one who knows what you have to gain, and all they could care about is themselves, and they don't care about your improvement. But if you are so afraid of missing a hook, getting pinged, flamed, or a 19-second cooldown, here's how you guarantee your hooks for 100% accuracy. If you know your hook's travel time and cast time well, you can hit 100% of your hooks not by predicting your opponents, but predicting your allies. Allow someone else to land a stun or root, and if it's long enough for that cast and travel time of your Q, then you can guarantee your hooks landing on that single target. You will have to account for cleanse, QSS, and tenacity as well if you truly want that 100% accuracy, but that's how you guarantee your hooks. Now, I know this sounds like I've built up to some kind of wet fart clickbait to teach you how important learning is, but no, there's a real point here. This is how you guarantee your hooks. This doesn't mean let Nautilus hit the hook for you. Not exactly always. There are many stuns in the game that are just objectively easier to hit or less punishing to miss. If you have an Annie with stun ready, Sona ults, Lux or Morgana stuns, or Twisted Fate gold card, all of these things make sense to wait for if they're available. Though if you're willing to let up a bit on that 100% guarantee, then more things open up, such as simply just slows. Singe W, Ashe passive, anyone with Rhyhorn can make it easier to land a hook as well. You don't need to predict quite as wildly when the amount the opponent can move and juke is massively reduced, but they do still have dashes and flashes available, and that's why we can't guarantee 100% accuracy with this approach anymore. The real lesson here is that it's okay to delegate the cool skill shots to your team sometimes, allowing yourself to get that deadly 1.5 second stun and gap closer a bit easier. But if CC and slows make it easier to land hooks, what about yours? I've mentioned this a bit already, but at close range a hook is still very dodgeable, but a flay cannot be dodged once cast. This applies a knock-up and then a slow, which helps telegraph your opponent's next moves, and also just makes tracking them with that hook a lot easier. You can also use it directly after Q's cast time, which, while still telegraphing your hook slightly, cuts some of that reaction time off if you can knock them towards yourself with flay. It's not quite as long a CC chain, but can help sometimes. The box is usually the goal for other abilities to help land, but in some situations you may find you can use the box to apply a 99% slow, which is so close to a stun that your next hook should be guaranteed if they have no dashes, and if they do, you can be certain they'll use them, and from there, it's back to your intuition. The last case would be to use your lantern, and sometimes it can be used to affect enemy pathing slightly. It's not reliable like this, nor is fake hooking them to make them juke early, but more practical is to use it to gain vision around a corner or inside a bush, so long as there was no one you could have lanterned in anyway. Since you can see it's all kind of coming together anyway, this doesn't mean you want to stop trying those non-guaranteed hooks. I used to really hold my hooks and never tried long range hooks, especially when I started streaming. I'd rather hold my 19-second cooldown hook and get a higher percentage accuracy that so I don't look as bad, than go for potentially game-changing plays. I must stress that those ranged hooks are never guaranteed, and your opponents have every ability to outplay you as you do outpredict them. But you don't learn to get better at this without trying. This applies to every champion with skill shots. You might worry that your allies will lose faith in you if you keep whiffing blitz hooks, but that's a pretty important ability to that champion. The better you are with it, the better you are with that champion, and you don't improve without a lot of trial and an absolute ton of error. Now, I've tried to be cute with all those extra hook techniques that no one will ever use. This is where I'd love you to come in with any skill shot or fresh hook tips you have for anyone else watching by commenting it down below. As a creator on YouTube and streaming fresh on Twitch, I've had no shortage of comments about hooks, either my lack of them in my earlier days, or my funny missed hooks in somewhat recent times. But the times I've put into actively going for hooks nowadays has paid off big time in my gameplay. And sometimes I even get positive comments about them. Ain't that nice? One of the things that really assisted that gameplay was me actively playing AP Thresh as seen in this video here. So do your best, and don't sweat the missed ones if you have a skill shot champion you really like, and have fun with it. And here we are, finally finishing the video on the 26th of May, many months after it first started. This has probably been the longest running project on the channel, part of it being down to me delaying to make other videos as well, streaming, and then needing a bizarre number of clips for very specific things. Though I do have a few more usages and tips for how to use Q that don't quite have as much to do with accuracy that I'm saving for another video. So if you're looking for more, please do hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to know when it will come out. I promise it won't be as long as this video. Here's a very special thanks to these YouTube members. Thank you AJBeat91, Warsquid, Ultimate Ground, Cryo's Dad, Gentleman Zeta, Lunar Eagle 1996, 53rd Alabama Booty Obi-Wan Kenobi, N Era, AC Mortal, Mr. Noodle, Bass13878, New Vegas Enjoyer, Gilbert Murrells, Edgardo Inati, Tierman Caranthil, and Luxius. Welcome to the new members and welcome back to the old members. Thank you again.